What's the creepiest thing you've ever witnessed? Story 1. I work as a dog walker. We had a client who was an extremely rich, well-known coin collector that lived alone with his dog, had a bit of an adult beverage problem. Really nice guy, just smelled like booze, and was very disheveled every morning when we'd pick his dog up to walk her. One Monday morning, I walk into his huge house, and it looks like he's asleep on the couch as he normally is, so I called his name to wake him up. I realized he's half on his couch and in a really weird position. He wasn't waking up, so eventually I walk over to him, and his eyes are wide open, blood coming out of his nose and mouth, and his hands are turning black and blue. Threw up on his patio and called 911. They said he'd been dead since Friday. He lived there alone and didn't have friends or family nearby, so I was the one that found him. Really, really sad, as he was very nice and not very old. But yeah, still have nightmares of that wide open mouth and eyes with blood covering his face. Story 2. This happened a few months ago. I was driving down my street, coming home after a night out. As soon as I approached my house, I noticed a guy in a suit just standing across the street in the field, looking at my house. I didn't want to pull into my house at that point, so I just drove around my neighborhood. 10 minutes or so go by and I drive by again. He's still there and he hasn't moved. At that point, I just drove around again. 5 more minutes, and he's still just standing there, staring at my house. At that point, I just pulled into my driveway to see what he does. Absolutely nothing. He didn't even flinch. Couple hours later, he vanished. No idea who TF he was, but it still creeps me out. Story 3. I'm a paramedic and had just put a car accident victim in a body bag with a decapitation from driving under a truck's rear trailer. Coroner gave us the okay to load him up. He was wearing a heavy jacket and sweater, so we just stuck him in the bag and began to load him. After we got underway to the morgue, I heard a noise, and the guy was thrashing around in the body bad violently. Oh, I was out of my mind. This guy had 90 of his head missing. We pulled over, and my partner, who didn't see it, goes back and opens the bag while I was about to piss myself. All of a sudden, a very small chihuahua jumped out and ran up to my partner. He must have been in the guy's jacket pocket and been knocked out or just quiet until we got underway. Took me the rest of the shift to relax after that. 32 years in EMS, and I've never had anything like that happen to me. Story 4. This is only creepy in hindsight. My, now ex-husband, and I were living in a building with 9 efficiency apartments. We were the middle apartment on the 3rd floor. One day, the neighbor that lived directly underneath us knocked on our door. He came in and started apologizing for being short with us several days before. Honestly, he had no need to apologize. He was not rude or anything. We got home at the same time he did, and he politely told us he didn't have time to talk. We told him it was fine and then chatted for a few more minutes. He told us how we were really nice neighbors, and we joked. About the time our cat got out and wandered into his apartment, probably thinking it was our apartment. Before he left, he said, "Hey, listen, I'm going to be working on a project, so if you hear banging and loud noises, don't get alarmed. When I'm finished with that, I'm going on vacation, so you won't see me for a while." We told him that was fine and didn't think much of it. About a week later, he was found dead in his apartment. The project he was working on was a scaffold to hang himself. Before he hung himself, he paid his rent in advance, left his door unlocked, and turned his heat up to 90 degrees. He had an ex-wife that he was feuding with, so we think that he wanted her to be the only one who would come looking for him and find him as a disgusting, decomposed mess. Unfortunately, he didn't account for the smell. We started smelling something putrid early one morning, so I called the rental office and had them investigate. I told them it was probably a sewer leak. The poor maintenance man walked in on the mess, So basically, the dude came up to say goodbye to us and to make sure we weren't on bad terms with him before he died. I wish we would have seen a warning sign or something so that maybe we could have gotten him some help, but we weren't close with him and there was really no way for us to have known. Answer: I've had 2 friends commit tragic end in my life, and it really boggles my mind how hard it is to tell they're about to. People say to look for signs of depression or anything, but to be honest, there really wasn't any. Or maybe I'm just bad at noticing. One of them, we played DD and then all went home and played games on our computers. We all said goodnight and everything. Everything was normal, made jokes, laughed. Next morning, he hung himself off of his bed, and his brother found him. I don't recommend really thinking about what you could have done different. Even being as close to my friend as I was, I had no idea what went through his head. None of his family or friends do either. All I can hope is that he died painlessly. Story 5. This actually happened last night. Me and my friend were walking home from a party, and we passed a generally abandoned campground. We heard a dog barking, which was unusual since it was 1 a.m. The bark sounded weird, though. It kept persisting until we both realized what it actually was. It was a guy imitating a dog's bark. We heard insanely aggressive crunches coming from the woods, so we booked it back to my friend's house. Maybe not the creepiest thing ever, but it really freaked us out. Answer: Probably about 10 years ago, I experienced the funny version of this. My brother and I had stayed long after, close at a bar our friends worked at. The neighborhood was one of those poor neighborhoods that was historically black, but slowly being gentrified by poor white kids, like us. On the walk home, we passed a house that was emitting a really strong plant substance smell from the enclosed porch, and suddenly heard a booming voice say, "Bark, bark, bark. I'm a dog that doesn't like white people." We cracked up super hard, did a little wave, and then continued on home. Story 6. Step-grandmother had Alzheimer's. The night before she died from the disease, she was alone in her room. I could hear her talking to other people in the room. She addressed them as dead relatives that she'd forgotten completely in the years prior. She didn't even remember me or my stepmother at this point. Updating them on the current events in the family. I didn't investigate. She was dead when I went in the next morning. Makes my skin crawl right off my body and down the street to think of it. Answer: I don't know if it can happen with dementia too, but when my grandpa was in hospice dying of cancer, he was bedridden and almost mute for the last few weeks. Then one night, he suddenly sat up in his bed, clearly asked for and got a Dr. Pepper, and had the nurse put on a hockey game. It was so sad. BC, my mom was ecstatic. She thought he was making a miraculous recovery. But he was only getting palliative care, and the nurse gently told my mom that they see this often, right before passing. It's like one last burst of energy and lucidity before they go. When the game was over, they laid him back down and he couldn't speak and just slept. He died the next day. I'm sorry you had to deal with your step-grandma's passing like that. I can't imagine watching someone slip away and then hear them having conversations with people who aren't there. But maybe she knew it was time and came back to herself for a little while, and talking about her family helped her prepare to go. I hope you're doing well these days. Story 7. I grew up in a hillside house which backed up to about 50 acres of woods. My room was on the 2nd floor, so it was basically level with a plateau and a road that led further up the hill and into the woods. One night I heard something and decided to look out the window. I saw a guy standing along the road just staring at the house. I flipped out and my mom came into the room. When she saw the guy, she proceeded to go outside and tell him to fudge off, which he promptly did. She told me she wasn't scared of stumblebums and would have stabbed his jerk. I was 10. Story 8. Ex-cop from NSW's Australia here. Shift started at 7 a.m. Instantly a double beeper, urgent job about someone being hit by a train. Got there and the station master told me that he was about 100 meters down the track. I said, any chance of resus? He looked at me like I was an idiot and replied, he has no head. I walked up the track and saw this young kid, he was 17, with no head. I looked up further and saw his head on the side of the track. There was little blood. His neck was pretty much seared from when he laid his neck across the track to end his life. When they came to take his body, they put his head in between his legs. You'll never forget that image of this person with their head facing forward in between their legs. Looked like a cheaply made horror movie. Definitely the creepiest thing I've ever seen and probably contributed to me not doing that job anymore. Story 9. This was probably 13 or 14 years ago. I was working as a delivery driver for an auto parts store, and I'm taking a shortcut through a neighborhood. It's during the winter, which in my state gets mid-level snow, but it's extremely cold. Suddenly, a toddler in just a diaper bursts out of the front door of the house, next to me, covering his ears and screaming at the top of his lungs. He runs about 20 feet and disappears into someone else's backyard. I immediately call the cops and start making laps around the block, trying to find him, because, again, it's winter and the kid's in a darn diaper. Cops show up and take over, but I'll never forget the look on his face or the sound of him yelling. Story 10. My family and I were driving in a thickly wooded area in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. Way up there, like Crystal Falls Iron Mountain area, where most of the homes were owned by wealthy, older people who rent out cabins to vacation goers. We had to drive through a long dirt road to get to the main road, and it led only to privately owned property on the other end. It was about 5 a.m. We saw a figure in a dark cloak carrying an old-fashioned lantern. I really don't know why anyone would be roaming around private property in a woods where there's bears and other dangerous wildlife at 5 a.m. Story 11. Technically missed the thing itself, but the news report was disturbing as hell. In short, my sister and I were about 30th away from this tragic end, and somehow we didn't notice. We eventually saw it on the local news. My sister threw up because she had been swimming in the water with a corpse. Story 12. Caregiving. Knock shift. Got a complaint around 3 a.m. about screaming and banging. Cool. Someone with Alzheimer's is sundowning. Let me redirect them. I get on the elevator to the 4th floor. As I approach the floor, I hear this wailing and shrieking, like a banshee or a witch, and she is just slamming her walker on everything. I get out, immediately confronted her, gently suggested let's go back to your room, have some water, maybe use the toilet. She is still howling up a storm, like just uncontrollable shrill screaming. Halfway down the hall, she immediately goes silent. She slowly picks up her hand and points a bony, trembling finger in my direction. He is right behind you. Immediately go into fudge this mode. I get the creepy crawlies all up and down my spine. I pick up the pace, take her back to her room, get her into bed. Immediately nope out. Fudge done. Answer. I had a resident at an adult foster home say something similar. Don't recall her diagnosis, but she saw her past abusers. Sometimes she saw children or angels, but usually it was her uncle husband's son, all of whom had served prison time for terrible abuse towards her. She felt most vulnerable in the bathroom when she showered, so a staff member of her choosing would come and sit in there while she showered, and she'd keep the shower curtain partially open to make sure you hadn't left her alone. One day, while she was showering, she yelled, "He's here! He'll hurt me!" We were trained to redirect and, if we couldn't, diffuse. First, I tried redirecting a bit, but she was getting absolutely panicked, so I said in my biggest authoritative voice, "You are not allowed in this building or on this property. Leave now or I'll call the police." She calmed down and said, "He's gone now." When she finished getting dressed, she looks up and screams, "He has a knife!" I told her that I'd keep him away while she left the bathroom. Not gonna lie, it was kinda creepy to be alone in the bathroom, getting rid of him. Story 13. Sorry for the mobile format. A few years ago, I was woken up by someone lightly poking me in the forehead at 5 a.m. I woke up thinking it was my roommate, but when my eyes started to adapt to the darkness, I saw a 2 meters man standing next to my bed. He immediately threw himself to the floor and covered his face. I didn't know what to do, and I couldn't even scream as I was completely shocked. While I was thinking of what to use as a weapon, he got up and started running out of the apartment, and for some reason I jumped out right behind him. Don't know why I did TBH, and only then I started screaming for help. He eventually made it out of the apartment and started going down the stairs. I gained some sense and realized I probably shouldn't be following this huge, tall, unknown man and ran back to my apartment. One of my roommates was ready to go follow him, bat in hand, and all but we decided it'd be better to just call the police. We never found out who he was or why he was there, and nothing was stolen or taken. Took me a long time to make it through the night calmly again, and even more to feel comfortable at that apartment, especially by myself. Answer: I, male, had a similar experience. I woke up to weird lights passing over me. Was a flashlight shining from the door. Since I was sleeping tipsy in a pile of blankets, the person probably didn't see me until I moved. I was still for a second wondering why my girlfriend would be using a flashlight when she would normally just turn on the light. Then it clicked. Adrenaline surged through me. It's a 3-story house. This was the on-the-ground floor. I rose from that pile of blankets full of rage and tripped slightly as I went to rush this person. They started booking it. I yelled my girlfriend's name really loud to make sure she was okay, she responded, and her voice sounded alarmed but safe. By this point, the person was just out the door. I grabbed my machete and started chasing this person. Fudge, they were fast a runner, but being chased by a 6'7" guy with a machete can have that effect. After about 2 blocks, I realized how shady I looked and went back home. Stuff was stolen from the 2nd floor while my girlfriend was watching TV on the 3rd. It still bothers me that he made it past me and was near her. Story 14. Worked in wound care. Lady came in with severe decubitus from neglect in a nursing home. Both her legs were rotted on both sides from lack of blood flow from not being turned. Put her in the whirlpool, and over the next 20 minutes, her legs disintegrate. All the rotted flesh comes off in chunks. When we pull her out, she basically has 2 skeleton legs with meat hanging off them. And maggots. The bastards opened the window in her room to deal with the smell of her rotting flesh in August, instead of rotating her like they should have. Story 15. When I was barely 19, I got a second job as a bartender in a dive bar. Everyone, including my boss, knew I was underage, but I was still encouraged to drink. One night, being too young and tipsy to know better, I accepted a ride home from a coworker. I was giving him directions to my house, turn left here, straight at the light, etc. But he started ignoring me and turning right when I said left, then left when I said go straight, and I got scared. Luckily, I carried a knife with me at the time. He insisted that he was taking me somewhere nice. I pulled out my knife and held it to his throat until he stopped the car. I got out and ran home. Quit that place right after. Edit. Yeah, I'm a girl, but this could have happened to anyone. In hindsight, dude was creepy way before then, but I was super oblivious, naive, and tipsy on top of it all. Years later, when Tarantino's Passing Proof came out and Kurt Russell's character turns left instead of right, it brought it all back. I don't carry anything anymore, but I definitely hold my keys in my fist if I ever feel in danger, just in case. Answer, OMG. That could have gone really bad really quickly. The woman who used to work the same night shifts at her volunteer job as Ted Bundy did, and sometimes got lifts home with him when he was already an active serial killer, wrote a book about it. She had considered him a good friend. Her name is Anne Rule, and he never once harmed her in any way. The book is called The Stranger Beside Me, if anyone is interested in reading it. Great book. But it just goes to show that even people you think you know well from your workplace can be hiding the most vile other side to their personality. Glad you got out of the experience, okay, OP? Story 16. I once worked as a server in a strip club. One member would pay me $20 to make an origami frog, then step on it. I thought at first it was just weird, but then I learned about the crush alternative tastes. Story 17. I don't find it that creepy, but my friend at the time had a meltdown over it. It was Halloween night. I was in 4th grade, I think. There was a cat that came up to me in the neighborhood we always trick or treated in. I have a huge soft spot for cats, so I pet it for a minute or two, then continue on my way. The cat starts following me. Then more cats start appearing and following me. This herd of cats followed us for multiple blocks, standing a few feet back, making no noise. They don't stop following me, so my friends started freaking out, called me a witch on the verge of tears, then made me call my mom to pick us up. The cats left when my mom drove up. Story 18. I'm 19 years old, summer after freshman year of college. I get to ride and hang out with 2 friends. Not gonna lie, we smoked a lot of pot. They are giving me a ride home at maybe 1 a.m. We decide to take the country roads, so a 15-minute ride on the highway takes about an hour in the country. On the drive, one friend starts talking about how weird it would be if someone ran out into the road covered in blood and asked us for help. What if they were a murderer or a zombie or something? As I mentioned, lots of pot. We go around a curve and a tree has fallen across the road. Luckily for us, someone had smashed through the tree on our side of the road already, so we didn't wreck. We see a car about 50 yards up the road run off on the left side and stuck between a tree and a fence. We stop to see if they need our help, and it gets weird. We are in the middle of nowhere, and there is no one in sight. There's blood on the steering wheel, but no one anywhere. We are thoroughly freaked out at this point, what with the earlier zombie madman conversation, and stoned. Don't remember what road we're on or what the closest intersection is. We drive to the next crossroad and call 911 and wait there for the officers so we can show them where the wreck is. There is a huge police response once the officers see the truck, the blood, and no one around. They must have gotten 10 to 15 cars out to start searching. We told several officers what we saw and waited in our truck, scared out of our minds because we were still worried about zombies and also getting arrested for plant substance. After 3 hours or so, the cops started to leave. Eventually, there were only a couple cars left, and I got up the nerve to get out of our truck and ask an officer if we could leave. He told me they found the other driver. She had no cell phone, 2002, and walked a few miles to the closest house. Apparently, we hadn't been needed for quite some time, but they all forgot about us, and we were too high and paranoid to bother the cops. I got home at 5 a.m., and I was still freaked out. I am so glad so many police responded and worked so hard to find that driver. I could picture them lying in a field somewhere dying alone quite easily, and we were all so lucky that night. I never got to thank the officers. I'm sure we looked high as heck, but I imagine they cut us a break for trying to help someone. Story 19. A couple of years ago, I had a dream I was in an elevator and could only press up. One woman and one man were in the back of the elevator. As we ascended, the elevator began shuddering and rattling. It paused, then I heard something snap. Then it was just the sensation of falling. The next day, I was in a dilapidated multi-story parking lot in an unknown part of town. I think my boyfriend and I were going to see a play, and it was the only parking lot with empty spots left. We got into an old, rusted elevator to go down. One woman and one man were already there. As we descended, the tiny elevator shuddered and then slowly stopped and started several times. We were all looking at each other, uncertain. I couldn't take it anymore. I pressed the button for the next floor. I made my boyfriend take the stairs for the next 5 floors. He was furious. Didn't see the woman and man again that night. Story 20. My friend and I were walking back to our dorms from the library, and it was getting dark. We started crossing the crosswalk and noticed a guy across from us pushing a stroller. He looked up and waved at us, but none of us waved back because we thought maybe he was waving at someone else. We start crossing, and the guy starts crossing too. When we passed the dude with the stroller, he kept looking at me like he wanted to say hi or something, but just kept staring. When we were finally on the other side, my friend said there was nothing in that stroller. We decided to walk a little faster after that.